Thank you, Seth and Donna. Welcome everyone to the talk. This talk is about cybersecurity, and it's an introduction into cybersecurity. So I really do hope that everyone just learns a little bit about the wonderful world of cybersecurity. I know it can be intimidating, but I'm hoping that I can do my job to help you feel a little bit better about exploring with cybersecurity. So today we are going to talk about a few different things. And granted, this is an intro level talk. Cybersecurity is very vast, like much of technology in general. So I can't do it complete justice, but I'm hoping that what we discuss today is going to help spark you to learn on your own and pick up a book and maybe play around with some things. So we're going to go into cybersecurity and what it is, as well as what makes up cybersecurity and the different aspects of it and the different people involved, as well as how cybersecurity affects us, our systems, our networks, and our buildings, and how we can protect ourselves and those around us. So before we get started, I'm going to briefly introduce myself and get on to the craziness. I am a cybersecurity professional. I've been working in cybersecurity for about 4 years. I also am a speaker, as you can see today. I also podcast as well, and I have done a LinkedIn Learning course on social engineering. So I've been around the block a few times in cybersecurity. I've been learning cybersecurity since 2012 as well. So I mostly have been self-taught. Some of it has been formal training, but I just want to let you know that anybody, literally anyone, can learn cybersecurity and tinker around with it. I'm definitely not a special snowflake for that. So what is cybersecurity? I was very intentional about using this graphic because I think when most of us think of cybersecurity, we get a little intimidated. Cybersecurity is this big, scary topic where there are attackers and hackers and things like that. And you can kind of sway, kind of hesitate when it comes to playing around with cybersecurity, unlike other technology topics or subjects. So I wanted to use this because it's symbolic of how all of us feel when we think about cybersecurity. However, this is just an illusion or just one of the stories that are being pushed about and surrounding cybersecurity. It isn't the whole makeup. I look nothing like that, and I'm a cybersecurity professional. So, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, cybersecurity is any measure taken to protect a computer or computer system against unauthorized access or attacks. So when you think of that, it's no different than protecting yourself when you're going out for a night ride or going out for a night walk. You would carry something with you maybe to protect yourself or keep alert to protect yourself. It's just digital. So I'm hoping that that definition kind of takes away the scaries when it comes to cybersecurity. So when it comes to cybersecurity, there's a lot of things that go into it, but all of the things that go into it center around these three main goals: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality is all about keeping private things private. You want to make sure that you know who has access to a piece of data or a system or a network, and you want to make sure that only the authorized individuals have access to that thing that you are trying to protect. In addition to that, we have integrity. And integrity also is something that you want to make sure that nobody can change data. You want to make sure that nobody can alter it without being authorized or without going through the proper protocol. So making sure that data stays exactly the same, no matter where it's stored, no matter how it's moved, is definitely another part of cybersecurity. Lastly, we have availability. So when you think about availability, you might think about a data center, you might think about servers. Oftentimes, if you go to a data center, they will talk about 99.9959 times availability. And what that means is when somebody needs access to a system, making sure that access is always available. So with these three things, you'll find that most of what we do as cybersecurity professionals and as cybersecurity enthusiasts come from these three fundamental basics of cybersecurity. So when it comes to cybersecurity as a profession or as a job, there are kind of three main perspectives where we kind of go back and forth when it comes to doing what we do. So red team, blue team, and purple team, they're teams in cybersecurity, but I like to call them perspectives. So when it comes to the red team, they have the offensive perspective. It can be internal or a contracted external third party. So these are the people that are going to be performing penetration tests. And a penetration test is also a test where someone assumes the personality or the identity of an attacker and then attempts to attack your systems, not for any kind of financial gain or any malice, but just to help inform you of where your holes are and where you should be focusing your efforts on protecting yourself. So a lot of red teamers are also fluent in penetration testing and the skills that go into that. And they also test the effectiveness of existing security programs. Then you have the blue team. The blue team is mostly internal and they have a defensive kind of standpoint. So they're more concerned about being proactively defensive and preventing any kind of attack from occurring. They might not be as familiar with an attacker's motives and attacker's moves and patterns. However, they are very, very well versed in protecting systems as they exist. And then you have the purple team, which is a lovely mixture of both. They have the perspective of the attacker, but they've also got the tactics and the strategy of the blue team. So they're a nice mix. And I think everyone who works in cybersecurity or plays around with it ends up going to the purple side more often than not in their career. Next, we've got the hackers, which everyone who has heard of cybersecurity definitely has heard of a hacker, but I'm not sure if every one of you knows about the different perspectives of a hacker. Some hackers are actually ethical hackers, which is what the first example has. White hat hackers are ethical hackers, meaning they have the permission of the system owner to search for vulnerabilities or attack or test the system's defenses. When you come to gray, this is one I like to kind of compare to a bug bounty hunter. Basically, someone who might not have the permission to scan or test a person's website, but they also will reveal the information to the system in question and say, I found this bug or this vulnerability or this hole here, and I would like some compensation for that or some kind of acknowledgement for finding this item. Then lastly, the one that everyone is more familiar with, which is the black hat hacker. That is someone who is completely out for personal or financial gain. Sometimes it also has something to do with politics or activism, but for the most part, it has to do with financial gain or personal gain. And they're more bent on destroying a system or stealing information, and probably more centered around cyber espionage or spying. So all that to say, how does cybersecurity affect us on an individual level, on a personal level? We have a whole bunch of threats out there, but why should we as an individual care? And the reason why I wanted to put that in this presentation is because part of being a cybersecurity professional or enthusiast or tinkerer is also thinking about your own personal security hygiene and how things might affect you on a personal level. And then when you extend outside of that, you'll be more prepared and more in the mindset of, on my own personal level, I lock my phone. So when I go to work, I'm going to lock my laptop as a habit and as you're building up your security hygiene. So here are the ways in which we're affected. I'm going to go over these 3 specific ways in which we might have heard of being affected by cybersecurity. In our systems, you may have heard of different types of malware. One such type is ransomware. So ransomware is malware that will lock your system up and lock your files up until you pay a fee. So a lot of malware comes in and is translated into that. And a lot of people have been affected, including corporations, but even on a personal level, individual people have been affected by ransomware. Also, Trojan horses. That includes malware that presents itself as trusted or harmless, but is really malware underneath. So let's say that you have Chrome.exe on your Windows machine. When it comes to a Trojan horse, it would disguise itself as Chrome, but really be a malware application underneath or a malicious application underneath. And lastly, we have viruses, which are pretty much anything that through human interaction will infect your machine. So viruses can also spread through human interaction by infecting maybe your email client or your machine when you send a message to someone. I know I've received Facebook requests with people asking me to click on links, but not knowing. So those are the things that affect our systems, but there's definitely more. For the sake of time, I can only go over a few. When we go into our networks, there are certain things that affect us there, like denial of service attacks. Basically, a denial of service attack is an attack where you basically attack a machine aggressively until it no longer is allowed to do anything, function. It just is so locked up with its resources that you are not able to do anything on the machine. And that affects one of the CIA goals that we have that I discussed before, which is availability. If you can't use your machine, then security has failed in that case. So denial of service attacks are a very popular way of stalling machines or making sure that a machine is rendered unusable. You also can have a man in the middle attack, which is when someone kind of drops in the middle of your connection and intercepts anything that you're sending out. So if you are communicating with your bank, for instance, and you're not using a secure connection, then somebody could intercept your login credentials or your account statement information, things like that. Lastly, we'll talk about our buildings and physical security. Unauthorized access is definitely something that can affect us. Somebody stealing our stuff or breaking into our homes is definitely something that can affect us, as well as property damage or graffiti. That is also something that can affect us. So lack of cybersecurity or lack of security in these particular cases definitely affect us on a level, and it kind of inspires or should inspire us to act and be more concerned about our security posture. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about a really, really fun idea for learning, but also for really seeing what's out there in terms of attacks. It's called a honeypot. So a honeypot is a server that you essentially put on the internet, and you make it intentionally vulnerable. And so when you make it intentionally vulnerable, what happens is people will obviously attack it, but you can study the logs to see how people attack it. And so when I was first starting to learn more about cybersecurity, especially from a red team perspective, I definitely had a couple of honeypots available on the web, and I funneled all of their logs to a Splunk server. And Splunk is basically a log aggregator. So I used that project to learn Splunk and learn how to search and sift through logs, but also how people might attack the server. So, and then setting it up is also a fun treat too, because you have to figure out how you're going to do that as well. This is a great way of learning a little bit of network security as well. So I always make sure that I suggest that in terms of increasing your knowledge when it comes to security and getting your hands dirty at the same time. So with all that being said, I gave you a very, very scary portion of the talk, which tells you about all the threats that we might face on a day-to-day basis, just in cybersecurity alone. And now I'm going to tell you how we can protect ourselves. So before I talked about basic security hygiene, and what that means is practicing good security, basically good security habits that keep us safe no matter what. When you build a good reflex or habit, you don't have to think about it. And half the time, people don't do things securely, not because they don't want to, but mostly because it's inconvenient. However, when you make something a habit, you're able to practice it regularly and you don't even have to think about it. So when it comes to security hygiene, even learning or attending this talk is a way for you to boost up your security hygiene. Also, password management. 81% of breaches happen because of weak or stolen passwords. So when you think about that, making strong passwords obviously cannot help with the stolen part, but the weak part, definitely it can. A lot of major breaches that have occurred and affected major brands that we know have occurred because of weak passwords in the system. So making sure that your passwords are strong is very important. And nowadays we have things like password managers that can store all of your passwords for you and create randomly generated passwords that are intentionally strong and hard to break. That way you don't have to remember it, but at the same time, you don't have to worry about weak passwords being the reason why somebody has gained access into your accounts. Next, we have antivirus scanning. If you have a computer, especially if you have a Windows machine, you know about Windows Defender, which is built into the machine. And scanning regularly, sometimes you find things, sometimes you don't, but having that regular check is a great way of having great security hygiene, because just in case you miss something or you don't think, or you click something you download, you have a fail-safe, a regular scan that comes and wipes it clean or alerts you when something is being downloaded that shouldn't be. And last, we have patch management, or updating your phone or updating your devices across the board. Updates, a lot of people do not know that security updates are regularly released, and they're part of the bug updates as well. And so a lot of times when you get a notification that an update is available, nothing's really changing with the application except for closing security holes or repairing security bugs. So I always like to stress that people should update and really be obsessive about it, mainly because updating prevents a lot of things from happening and prevents you from being vulnerable, especially when somebody else is doing the heavy lifting of correcting the code that has the hole in it in the first place. And all you have to do is press a button in the middle of the night so that your phone can update. So I always like to stress that that's a great way of maintaining security hygiene, because you're always knowing that you are up to date when it comes to security holes and it being patched. Another topic I would like to talk about is social engineering. Social engineering is the art of getting a person to do something that they wouldn't ordinarily do. So a lot of times people think it's some really super scary narcissistic personality that goes around lying to people. But in my course on LinkedIn Learning, I talked about how a 6-year-old can actually social engineer you and trick you into thinking that they've cleaned their room by shoving all their clothes in their closet and showing you what you want to see in order to get them to play video games or go outside. I don't know if kids still do that. So things like that are a part of social engineering. And I love to take these topics and break them down on a regular, everyday level, because we like to build them up to be something super huge and nefarious all the time. However, in and of itself, the definition of social engineering is fairly neutral. It's what we do with that is the problem, or how it affects others that is the problem. So social engineering is something that we're also familiar when it comes to phishing, which I'm going to talk about in this slide. When it comes to phishing, emails that are sent trying to get you to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. So whether that's logging into a site that looks like your bank site, but may not be your bank site, or has a link inside of it that promises that you're going to have a $5 million gift card or something like that. These are ways in which social engineers attempt to entice you to do something that you wouldn't do. So the art of persuasion, deception, those things are definitely used when it comes to social engineering in the traditional sense. So when it comes to phishing, that's through email. And when it comes to baiting, that can actually be through a number of methods. You can bait someone in person, actually. You can bait someone online by offering something, whether that be a gift card, whether that be saying that the person wants something. All of these different methods can be used to bait someone into doing something or saying something that they wouldn't ordinarily say, but are kind of wrapped up in the thing that they want, or the incentive that you're giving them to give the information. And last, we have spear phishing, which is a very specific type of phishing. It's when you target members of a specific organization in order to gain access to that system. So for instance, if I had some sort of agenda with, let's just say, Twitter.com, and I decided I was just going to find folks that worked at Twitter, that would be me targeting specific people and then sending emails to them that they would probably believe, like maybe sending it and pretending to be from a CEO or pretending to be from somebody equally important in that organization, to get the person to give me access or give me account information or any other thing. So these are the different things that happen when it comes to common social engineering attacks. Now, when it comes to combating social engineering, which I wouldn't tell you about the dangers if I wouldn't be right if I didn't give you the solution. There's a number of things that you can do. The main thing out of all these suggestions is to just stop and think and slow down. But when it comes to these specifics mentioned here, you can use something like VirusTotal, which is basically a scanner. Like, it will scan your email attachments, it can scan files, and it also runs against different antivirus scanners. So you can, if you are not partial to any particular scanner, it will do all of them for you and let you know what each scanner returns. So sometimes the scanner might say this is malware, and sometimes they might not catch it. So if one fails, the other one comes up. So I use VirusTotal all the time, as well as URL Scan, which is also a sandbox application. So essentially, if you don't want to visit a website, or you're not sure about it, you're not sure it might be sketch, you can put the website URL in that website, and it's going to visit the site on your behalf and let you know what happens after it visits the website. Also, shredding sensitive documents. I also have a shredder. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but there is a shredder here. Shredding important or sensitive documents just ensures that when if somebody decides to go through your trash and look for information, they're not going to be able to make much sense of it without taking a long time to basically put the puzzle pieces together. Also, being mindful of what you post online or on social media is very important. There are some times where people can see certain things in your background, and they'll be able to know where you frequent, and may use that in terms of gaining more information about you to try to figure out how to gain access to you or to your systems or your accounts. So being mindful of what you post, looking twice at a picture, making sure that there's no information that you don't want out there is very important. And lastly here, multi-factor authentication is also super important. Making sure that there's another layer of defense between you and your accounts is just, it just adds another difficulty for an attacker. If they have your password, but they don't have your second layer of authentication, then they've just stopped at the second layer and they can't continue forward towards your account. So a good multi-factor authentication is Duo, where I work. They do have a lot of great authentication tools or services, as well as Google Authenticator. There's multiple different ones out there, but having that implemented definitely helps as well. So I really hope that you enjoyed this talk. I really hope that you got some great nuggets today. It was a lot of information, and I'm very hopeful that this definitely sparks some interest when it comes to the wonderful world of cybersecurity. You can reach me at any of these places and ask any question, and I can point you in the right direction, or I can answer them if I have the knowledge. I am available on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I do have a podcast, like I mentioned before, called Coolest Nerds in the Room, and it's available anywhere, but I just put Apple Podcasts there for just being succinct. And in addition to that, there is a course that you can take that's available in Microsoft Learn, and it is geared towards network security. Network security is just as important as any other security, and it's a really cool class that takes you into the introductory level of what network security is and how a network works in general. So I would say that that's a great follow-up to this course, a great commentary after this. And it's also not very long, 36 minutes, and will give you great information to kind of make sure you keep the excitement when it comes to learning about cybersecurity going. Thank you so much.